Hey Waffle Gang, I do hope you're well. My name is Mark and today we're checking out some more Reddit stories, and if you do love a Reddit story, why not consider hitting that like, subscribe, maybe that notification bell too, and let's crack on with today's first story. Much love guys. Now today's first story comes from the Am I the Arsehole subreddit from Self-Serve Sports Wash and says, Am I the arsehole for keeping score with my family and ruining dinner? I, 27 male, am the third of 4 siblings, and have always felt like an afterthought. Laurie, 33 female, Chuck, 29 male, and Jay, 25 female, have always gotten the first and best from my parents and each other. I get the leftovers if I'm lucky. I haven't gotten a birthday present from any of my siblings in about 10 years, but I still get asked to pitch in for group gifts for each of them every year. On Friday night, we were having a family dinner, and it honestly felt like every other sentence was a dig at me, or a less than subtle brag about my siblings about something they have been given by my parents that I was denied. They talked about how nice almost all of our weddings were, but made sure to mention it was okay that my wife had a small low-key wedding, and it was okay, we loved it. But they brushed over the fact that my parents paid for all of my siblings' weddings, but not mine. Because somehow they couldn't afford it, because they were saving up for Jade's wedding. They brought up how little student loans they have, because my parents helped them. All of them lived on campus at expensive 4-year schools. I lived at home and went first to a very prestigious, very hard to get into watchmaking school. I got paid to attend this school, so I paid rent at home. My parents paid for my tools, and I appreciate the help, I really do. But they paid $120 to $150K each for my siblings. They gave me $7K for the tools. But to them, it's equal. When I went back to school on my own, I didn't ask for money and wasn't offered it. When my brother went back to school, they covered everything without him even having to ask. There were many other small moments, comments about cars and other lifestyle choices. But what made me snap was my brother and his wife mentioning their marriage being so great because they do things like spontaneous dates, like the one they had the prior Friday night. The Friday night where my parents called my wife and I last minute to cancel plans. They had to eat dinner at our house because they had to watch Chuck's kids because of an emergency. Turns out that emergency was a dinner for Chuck and my sister-in-law at Texas Roadhouse. I spent hours making my grandpa's ziti and meatballs with homemade marinara because it's my mum's favorite. I wanted more than anything to scream at them, but instead I got up and left without saying a word, and my wife followed me. When my mum called me later to ask why I left, I just explained exactly why. I explained the favoritism, the unfairness, and the fact that it doesn't feel like they care about me. She didn't say much, and I was really looking for an explanation or an apology in the moment. I just felt like it was self-evident, but if she didn't really see it, I'd spell it out. Evidently, at least parts of what I said have been shared with my siblings because now Chuck and Laurie are furious at me and saying I ruined dinner, and my mum is upset that I'm hurt. They say I'm immature for keeping score. Am I the arsehole? You're not keeping score in this situation. This is your life, and these are feelings that you're absolutely entitled to, and expressing them. It sounds like you've been through a hell of a lot from what you've explained in this one story. And your siblings are just as bad in this. There's no way they haven't realized what's been happening, and they haven't called it out as well. They've continued to allow it. And I'm really not sure what the solution is to this apart from distancing yourself from them because they haven't got your best interests at heart. It doesn't sound like you're priority to them. So why should they be a priority to you? You can continue to let them know how you feel, which, I think is absolutely fine as well. But I'm struggling to see how their attitude will change in this. I just don't believe that no one's realized what's been happening here apart from yourself. And on the back of this, when you finally called it out, no one's taken a step back and said, oh shit, yeah, that has been awful for OP. No one's considered that. Instead, they're attacking you and calling you immature. It's shitty behavior. So the first comment says to OP, not the arsehole, your siblings are keeping score as well. They use that score to belittle you every time they see you. Your parents, including your mum, who is all of a sudden upset that you're hurt, have allowed that to happen. Your mum is only upset because you finally stood up for yourself and called them out. Keep on keeping score. They certainly will. Opie says honestly, on the phone she didn't seem agitated at all. But when I started explaining everything, she just kind of got sad, I guess. She got really quiet and didn't say much. It's called guilt. Next commenter says, not the arsehole. I don't know if this is the best solution, but if I were you, I'd write everything down just like you told us, then send it to each one of my family members in a group chat, then block them. I'd move on from a relationship with them and love them from a distance. Sidebar. Do you and all your siblings look exactly alike? Opie says Jade is adopted, so no. But she has always been the baby and treated as such anyway. My first draft had a lot more background, but it was way over the character limit. I almost look exactly like my paternal grandfather. I even had the same thing with my eyes, where they were blue when I was born, but have formed a brown ring around the outside as I've grown up. So there's almost no possibility that I'm not my father's son, if that's what you're getting at. Jade is on my side incidentally, and she feels awful about the wedding thing, but she didn't find out about them not paying for my wedding until about 6 months ago, which is 6 months after her wedding. She assumed that they had paid for part of my house or something, because verbally that had always been the deal. But no, I got to pay for my own wedding, and my parents never honoured the long-standing agreement of, we have money saved for each of you, and you can either use it for a wedding or anything else you want as a wedding gift when you get married. This is not Jade's fault. She didn't ask for any of this. She didn't even get to plan her own wedding. My mum and Laurie did that. It was extravagant because my mum and Laurie wanted it to be extravagant. Jade and her husband mostly hang out with my wife and I when they're in town. That has been a pattern for a long time. Family gives her stuff she didn't ask for to, I guess, make up for her early childhood sucking, and it's often at the expense of me. But since she was like 6, she'd always then share it back with me. Jade and I are fine. She shouldn't have been responsible for policing the fairness of the adults in our life. Next commenter says, have you laid out all this information in front of your family like you told us, or have you personally been taking all this in yourself? I'm glad your sibling Jade is empathetic with you. Opie says, the Friday night phone call with my mum was the first time I laid more than one incident at the time out for anyone. It's also the most thorough I've been about explaining any single incident because it's the first time I didn't get interrupted. We're on the phone for 1.5 hours. I was talking for most of it. The next commenter says, you seem like an emotionally strong person. Sometimes when people know they can't get to you, they can't help but keep trying. It says more about them. Question. If you weren't related, would you even hang out with these people? You don't get to choose your family, you know. Don't worry about rocking the boat. Sail your own. Ooh, I like that. Opie says, I'd definitely still hang out with Jade and her husband, as well as my grandparents. But my Oma, Dad's mum, already sees me more than anyone else in my immediate family, and my Pop, Mum's dad, has spent more time with me than other grandkids since I was a child. I have autism, and he almost certainly would have been diagnosed had he been born today. We both need breaks from crowds, and we have similar sensory issues, so we'd bail on family gatherings to go play bocce for as long as I can remember. But Opie comes in with her first update and says, I don't know where the best place to put all this, so I'm putting it here if that's okay. My first draft contained some of this info, but I had to edit it a lot to get it down to the character limit. Some of this has been shared in other comments, but I'm just consolidating in hopes this is seen and answers questions. 1. There is no reason to believe I'm not my father's child. The list of genetic coincidences that would be necessary for that to be the case is long and not worth rehashing. He doesn't have any male relatives that could explain it either. He has one sibling, my aunt, and none of his cousins have ever been in his life, or even remotely local. I look just like my paternal grandfather. I always have. He died when my father was young, but by all accounts, he was a good father and is remembered fondly. 2. My youngest sister has been the beneficiary of many, if not most of the things my parents chose not to give me. But she did not ask for any of that and has been one of the only people consistently trying to make it right. I mean, for goodness sake, she was trying to fix it when she was 6. She has definitely not seen everything, but what she has seen, she has tried to correct. She is perhaps guilty of assuming the best of people and not asking questions. But she isn't heartless, and getting angry at her isn't going to fix anything. We talked for a long time after I posted this. She'd been told she was contributing to a birthday gift for me every year since at least 2018. She gave money to my older sister to buy my wife and I tickets to my favourite soccer team. And then my wife and I inevitably posted about going to the games she assumed one of the games we went to each year was the gift she'd been contributing money towards. There's a lot of backstory there, but the gist of it is Jade and I have always gotten along well, and Jade does not participate in singling me out negatively. She and her husband spend time with my wife and I frequently, usually just the four of us. 3. I was definitely favoured by my maternal grandfather growing up, but it's not like I got extra gifts or anything. He and I just have very similar personalities, and that showed at a young age. I'm on the spectrum, and I feel very strongly that were he my age, he'd have been diagnosed as well. We both struggle mightily with a lot of sensory things, but loud crowds and being surrounded by a lot of disparate sources of noise, like perhaps his loud Italian family, overwhelms both of us. So both of us hide for at least some portion of all family gatherings. Over time, we started hiding together by just leaving to play bocce, or locking ourselves in the kitchen to cook. As an adult, he has made comments that indicate he sees that I'm not being given as much, and in the last 2 to 3 years he has definitely given more items to me than anyone else. Things he wants me specifically to have if and when he passes, and that he wants me to enjoy now. That was definitely a source of tension on Friday. He's quite wealthy, and my older siblings are accusing me of trying to enrich myself based on inheritance. I have no clue what his plans are, and I have not and will never ask. It's not my business. He has always had a pathological need to make things even. Everyone gets the same number of boxes at Christmas, with as near as much of the exact amount of money spent on each recipient, so I do not expect him to behave differently with his estate. I honestly expect that anything that doesn't go to charitable causes will be divided evenly, but I really think it's all going to charity. But where my older siblings see the monetary value of his record collection and view it as a financial windfall, I see a beautiful collection of music I keep listening to. I'd never sell that. They feel that I am hoarding the antique watches he gave me, the most valuable of which is a 60s Timex Marlin. But again, they want me to sell them and divide the cash. First of all, they aren't valuable except in sentiment. Second of all, Pop is still very much still alive and only gave them to me because he knows I'll repair the ones I like and wear them. Selling them would be extremely rude and entitled. They're angry that he gave me his first nice car, because it does have a nominal value, even now, too old to be valuable as a reliable vehicle. Not old or rare or desirable enough to be a collector's item, but to me, it's a sentimental item. It was his Sunday car for years, and while I put a lot of work into keeping it running, well, it's in excellent cosmetic condition. My older siblings are contesting that I actually am the favourite, and the very measurable and extremely generous financial gifts given to them by my parents are somehow dwarfed by their, in my opinion, very inflated estimation of the financial value of the gifts my grandfather has given me recently. 4. My paternal grandmother has openly favoured me more and more as I've aged. Again, this is not financial, and to my knowledge, she isn't in a position to leave me an inheritance. Not that I've even asked that of her. There is an old clock of hers made by a local clockmaker and housed in a handmade cabinet that I used to spend hours looking at when I was really young. That she actually put multiple labels inside as early as when I was 5 or 6, saying that it belongs to me. But I didn't ask for that. I appreciate it and will gladly accept it if she still feels that way when the time comes, but I don't spend the time I spend with her as some sort of plot to steal her clock. I just like hanging out with my grandma. She's a really funny lady, and she likes walking with my wife and I and our dogs. She stays with us in our house on holidays in lieu of staying in the guest house my parents had built for her. My siblings are under the impression that she has somehow supported me financially. Again, unless there is something I'm not aware of, she is very much not in the position to do this. 5. My wife and I will be meeting with my parents at some point over the next week to talk. I do not know what to expect, but I will be taking the time to write stuff down in preparation. I don't even know what I want from it, but I will be bringing up family therapy. But around 2.5 months later, Opie updates again and says, so, update time. About a week after that post, my wife and I sat down with my parents and cleared the air. As several people suggested, I wrote down my thoughts and compiled, to the best of my knowledge, a listing and full accounting of the disparity in what my siblings were given over the years and what I was given. I did actually sit down and do the math, and it turns out that while I was at the Technicum, I actually paid my parents more in rent than they ever paid for my tools. The final reckoning came to between 370k on the high end, Jade, to 190k on the low end, Chuck, for how much my parents directly gave to my siblings and they never gave to me. Sitting down and seeing the full amount all spelled out like that is probably the angriest I got during this whole mess. My parents had been aware there were discrepancies, but really pushed back on the actual amounts until we sat down and went through each major gift and incident case by case, by which point my dad had admitted my reckoning was likely conservative. That was more or less the end of any productive talk that night. My dad just claimed they didn't think it had gotten that bad, but wouldn't give any details about how they could have possibly not noticed. In the interim, Chuck and Laurie continued to escalate their anger, continued to call and text me, my parents, and extended family. I've not spoken to either of them directly since, and I don't expect to anytime soon. Roughly a week after that first sit down, my mum and dad asked to meet again. Lots was said, but the gist of it is, they felt like I was doing well and didn't need their help. Basically, they thought I'd be fine without them. They admitted they probably live outside their means and gave more to my older siblings than they should have and could never have given me that much. They claimed the timing of my wedding lined up with probably the most dire of their overspending and lack of saving, and that they literally did not have the funds to live up to their promise, especially as they were paying for Jay's tuition, car, and apartment at that time. They have offered money, they have offered to pay for vacations, a car, all kinds of stuff, but I think they don't really get it yet. My wife and I don't want their money, but we aren't really sure what an ideal resolution to this looks like. At least they have admitted they were unfair and are open to working things out. My wife and I spent Easter with Jade and her husband and my grandparents. My mum and dad came over in the evening. This seems to be more or less the new normal for now. A commenter suggests, they said, I bet they'll ask you for monetary help with end-of-life costs. Opie says that's a bit of why I don't want to accept any gifts from them right now. As it currently stands, if nothing changed about our relationship between now and when they retired, I wouldn't feel any guilt about leaving them on their own. Although I'd bet anything Jade and her husband would make sure they didn't become destitute. I just really don't think I'd be in a position to be guilted into helping them. If I let them pay off my mortgage though, I know they would try and use that as leverage. I know them too well not to know that's what they'd do. Right now I don't wish any ill on them. I just wouldn't step in to help them, at least not monetarily. They spent recklessly. I think they still spend recklessly. I don't think any of my grandpa's frugality or understanding of being poor made its way down to my mum. I think she doesn't remember when she was really little and his company hadn't taken off yet. Or if she does, she refuses to take any lessons from it. I don't think they have robust retirement savings, and I don't trust them to live frugally, even if they do. I fully expect them to be broke within 5 years of retiring, and I don't want them to have a way to try and guilt me into helping. I know Chuck and his family aren't going to feel like they're in a position to help. Even if they are, they make great money, but always complain about being broke. By no definition are they broke. They just have expensive tastes and trashy friends. And unless there is a mending of fences, Laurie will likely be too mad at them for babying me by doing the bare minimum and listening to my grievances that she'll be glad to see them suffer. Especially if she doesn't think there's going to be anything for her to inherit. I really truly think she would discard her own parents without a second thought if they blew through her inheritance. Then more info on Jade and the birthday gifts. Opie says I don't really have time to address everything, but the birthday thing with Jade was addressed in comments on the first post. The short version is she and her husband have been giving Laurie money, and a really sizable amount as it turns out, every year to buy my wife and I tickets to see the Union play. Then, when we inevitably posted pictures of us at games, she assumed that at least one of those games was the gift. She even pointed out one of my Instagram posts last year explicitly called it a birth gift. I didn't specify it was my gift from my wife. And to be fair, the comment Jade left on it at the time, in retrospect, very much reads like she was glad I was enjoying her gift to me. So the reality is Laurie was just straight up stealing a couple of $100 from Jade every year for at least 5 years. I love Jade and her husband, and they are very sweet, but they are very naive. Both grew up wealthy, both grew up spoiled, and neither has had any real sense of how much things cost. They just genuinely thought tickets to a Union game cost multiple times over what they really do, and didn't blink when Laurie asked for money for my birthday gift every year. Jade and her husband are not speaking to either of my siblings now. They were both genuinely astonished to hear I hadn't been getting gifts from my siblings. Fun side note that they took my wife and I to a game this spring and paid for everything, unprompted, and not thinking it made up for everything. They just wanted to do a nice thing. I will not pretend Jade is perfect or that you can't tell she's been overly spoiled, but my god does she try hard not to be entitled. She and her husband do well financially in their own right and they share freely. I know she got a leg up, but it's not fair to begrudge her that. She didn't ask for it, and she has never rubbed it in my face, unlike Chuck and Laurie. She is mortified at how uneven things are. Chuck and Laurie are mad it's not continuing. Commenter says, are your parents aware that Laurie has been stealing from Jade? Opie says they are. I know they are still in contact with her and her family, as well as Chuck and his. Laurie and Chuck are the two that has given them grandchildren, and I don't want or expect my parents to turn a cold shoulder to them. I don't intend to pry into their relationship. My parents know what Laurie did. How they want to approach it is their business. In the meantime, my own relationship with my parents is strained and pretty low contact, and I'd rather focus on that. I don't really have any real relationship with either of my older siblings. I can't see myself ever caring enough to try. If either of them have a come to Jesus moment and genuinely want to make things right, they know where to find me. And another thought from OP on not wanting money from his parents. OP says, I believe if I let my parents give me money, which I'm not sure if they even have, they will consider us even, and not actually address the fact that even without the money I was treated differently. Until I have a reason to believe the offer of money is coming from anywhere other than an attempt to get back into my good graces and buy my forgiveness, I'm not interested. My wife and I both work and earn good money. We're by far the least well off of my family, but we're comfortable, and we have savings and retirement savings, which may be more than can be said for the others except Jade and her husband. I don't see or speak to my parents as much as I used to, and so far that's been fine by me. If they want to actually self-reflect and try to make amends, I'm very open to it, but not until they acknowledge the non-monetary favoritism as well. Someone says, do your grandparents know? Opie says my grandparents are fully caught up. They already knew it was skewed. Part of why I'm not overly concerned with settling the score, for lack of a better phrase, is that I've now been told in no uncertain terms that I will come out of this better off. I know that any relationship with my brother or older sister is almost certainly beyond repair. I've accepted that. I think letting my parents ease their conscience by throwing money at the problem will only lead to them not actually taking accountability for their actions. And I don't think there's too much advice you could give to OP in this situation. Perhaps there is, but for me, I think OP's handling it in the best way possible at the moment. They're keeping their parents at arm's length, not having much to do with Laurie and Chuck, who just seem to see like OP as some kind of like competition, if you like. And I think from the grandparents' perspective, I think they're going, from what it sounds like to me, it sounds like they're going to sort OP out in the end. That OP's going to come out of this fairly well off. Not that OP's focused on that, but I can certainly see it going down that path. I personally wouldn't want nothing to do with those siblings as well. That's not how siblings treat each other. That's not love. These are just two people that's acting absolutely shitty. And I like the way that OP's dealing with his parents. There is the chance of like, you know, completely cutting them out if they want, but they're pretty low contact. As I said, keeping them at arm's length until, or if, they ever come to their senses and realize the favoritism that they show to the other siblings. But we've covered a lot of story to do with favoritism on Reddit and on this channel. But what do you guys make of this situation? If you was OP, how would you deal with it? Is this one of them ones where you just walk away from all the drama? Do you think OP's handling it a good way? How would you deal with it? Let us know your thoughts down in the comments below. And just a huge thank you from the bottom of my heart for getting involved in today's stories. Your love, your support, your time always means the absolute world to me. So thank you so much. And hopefully I'll see you in the next one. Take care and much love.